not just can you, listener, get me visible,
Right.
but what can I do to serve you? Hey, I'm Josh.
And I'm Laura.
And this is the Devising Good podcast, where we talk about how churches, small businesses, and nonprofits can use video to create understanding and provoke action.
So we want to talk tonight about podcasting.
Yeah, with you.
And why podcasts, why that's such an important thing for an organization to think about starting.
Yes. I'm pretty convinced that podcasts are, something you should really, really seriously consider. Now, before we talk about this more, I actually want to ask you some questions. So, you listen to podcasts, right?
I do, yeah.
Okay. Why?
I can have helpful content when I'm doing something where I can be listening at the same time. So,
Okay. Yep.
just helpful things.
So helpful content
Yeah,
that's
helpful
accessible
content.
because you're able to do stuff while it's not like necessarily that you have to watch it.
Yeah, I don't
Okay.
typically watch. I
Yep.
typically listen. It seems silly, but it's really important that the podcaster's voice and personality, I connect with them.
Yes, I get it.
That they're, I think I've started one or two and it's been like, I just can't do this one.
Yep. So
Hopefully-
if that's you
hopefully.
all with this podcast because of me, I'm not offended. I get it. But that is a legit thing. Yeah. So
Yeah.
you want to connect with them, their personality, but their voice actually has to not grate on your nerves, or their speech patterns or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Side note, if you're listening to this podcast and you hear an airplane or something crazy fly by, it's because our house is right under a flight pattern. So anyways, I apologize for that. I can't do anything about that. That's just a thing. Anyways, so why, so there's helpful content.
Yeah, if
things
there's a
that.
topic I want to learn about and there's someone that I know, I'm like, oh, I want to hear this from them. I want to hear their perspective on it.
Yes.
Or maybe there's a series that they're doing that I want to hear about.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Awesome. Are there podcasts that you listen to that you keep coming back to?
Yes. Risen Motherhood is one
Yeah.
that I really love.
And why do you keep coming back to that one versus just one-off episodes?
They always relate whatever they're talking about back to what the Bible says. And so just the way that they talk about it is very full of grace. And I found a lot of their stuff helpful, just
Cool.
different topics. So
Okay.
just kind of hits an area of life that's
Yeah.
a big prime for me, with
Yes.
mothering. So
Yeah,
thinking about that and a lot of different things related to that.
that's great. I mean, I was thinking about the podcasts I listen to. So I usually like listening to podcasts, kind of like what you were saying. There's things I want to be educated on, and these voices I want to hear from.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I've connected with them. I feel like I can maybe trust them. So, for example, Pro Church Tools by Brady Shearer and Alex Mills. If you are in church communications at all, y'all should subscribe to that podcast. It is incredibly helpful, just on a spectrum of things. It gives you things to think about. Not everything that they talk about is applicable to the church I work for, or the one we go to.
Sure.
But it's very helpful. They come up with a lot of good stuff.
Nice.
There's one I really like called Making a Mark. It's from Josh Whiting, who a lot of people know him as Bright Cole, and Ashley Ulmer. And they're two freelancers who do a lot of work for church organizations and stuff. They're primarily designers, logo designers. I'm more on the video side, and I dabble in graphic design stuff. But they've brought a lot of just helpful ideas when it comes to creativity and things like that. And then video creators and Think Media, I like those podcasts because they give a lot of helpful tips on YouTube and video and gear and different things that are going on, and it just kind of keeps me informed with those things. And those 3 podcasts, like, those are all people that I trust. I actually like have a little bit of connections with some of them, and so there's always like a reason why I want to listen to them. Plus, like, what they have to say is actually like very helpful. The way they say it, again, their voice isn't annoying, things like that.
Yeah.
And I mean, then there's the podcasts that are just like straight up funny. Like, those are the ones I like. So those are like I'm in like working mode. I'm like wanting to learn these things, whatever. Then there's other podcasts I listen to that just like crack me up. I think they're funny.
Help you unwind.
Right. But, you know, I was thinking about with podcasts. So I am proposing that if you are listening to this podcast, so if you're listening to this podcasting, you are not my mother, then you are probably a marketer, a salesperson, a communications person. Like, in some way, you are trying to talk to your audience, the people that your organization serves, in some form or fashion. If you're one of those people, I actually think podcasts are going to be one of the best tools for you for building an audience, educating them, and engaging them. But this sounds weird to say. Like, so honestly, podcasts are actually a decent amount of work. This is the
when
third.
You first told me, I was like, this was going to be the topic of the podcast, I was like, oh my word, like it almost feels overwhelming.
Yeah. And side note,
okay.
This isn't going to be the only episode we do on podcasts.
Yeah.
Because there's actually a lot that goes into it.
But you're saying that this is becoming a trend for this year, right? Like, this is the way that marketing is going moving forward.
It is fascinating how I would say it's a way that I think it's an accessible way to do content marketing.
Okay.
And
can you define content marketing for me?
Yeah. So it's just basically making lots of different content to market whatever your thing is.
Okay.
So it's crazy because like more and more social platforms are adopting this model, but there's like, I feel like TikTok was like the biggest one that started this, but there's a For You sort of algorithm, right? Like, even Twitter, just like in the last week or two, rolled out, there's like a For You section where they're trying to predict what you want to see. And like, so like more and more when you create content, it's less about getting it in the right people's feeds, because they will self-select. Like, the algorithm will put it in front of them for the most part. You need to just be making the stuff.
Gotcha.
And so that's why, and again, this is just from what I'm seeing, I'm experiencing. It's part of the reason why we're doing a podcast here. I have some dreams and stuff of what I'd like to see happen at our church, and different things. And I'm trying to encourage as many people as possible to think about doing a podcast. And we're going to pause for this airplane. One of the important things, kind of just from the start though, is, so podcasting is a lot of work, like we were saying. Like, I set up the microphones, the cameras. I know. I should just do a little quick video with this here. I'll just take this with my iPhone. So there's Laura. I got this. I gotta talk in front of the microphone, but there's a lamp back there. We got a blanket there. There's actually a blanket blocking our air purifier, so there's not tons of sound. Here's our kitchen. There's a thing here. Oh, and there's another lamp. Like, and this is on as bright. Like, it's super. It's actually kind of janky the way I have it set up. And if you have a designated area, this makes it a lot simpler. So at church, we have a designated area. It's a lot simpler. But, you know, having a podcast is going to take some work. It's going to take some effort to do it in a way that I think would be helpful.
But you've also been talking about ways to use a podcast that almost make it sound like you need the podcast to do all these other things.
And I think if you have a mindset of, I want to build an audience, I want to educate them, and I want to engage them, a podcast is actually like kind of motivating.
What are the ways you can use a podcast?
Yeah, so you have a long form podcast, right? You have this static piece of content. It's almost like a blog. It's like an audio and visual blog post where you take a topic, you talk about it. Maybe it's just you. I highly recommend having at least one other person, no more than 3-ish people on the podcast. But a lot of times people would rather listen to, instead of just a monologue, a conversation between two people. The podcast is kind of just like this educational piece, and you can talk about all these different topics. Like, I think last week we were talking about how there are a lot of times we can be so in the weeds, and there's so many things that we have realized about how the people we serve, like what they should be doing, and we're a few steps ahead of them, right? Having a podcast gives you the opportunity to educate people and kind of bring them along in the journey. So just what are those baby steps that they need to be listening, that they need to be hearing and understanding, so you can bring them along, and hopefully kind of like give them the information you wish they knew. You know what I'm saying? And honestly, and then positioning it in a way where they're like, yeah, I wish I knew that.
Right.
You know, that's the marketing piece of this.
Right.
But so, yeah, you can use the you can use the podcast as a kind of blog post topical thing, but then you can cut that up into a couple minute YouTube videos that you post, and you're able to share that with others. I think about like salespeople, you know, if there are things that you talk about in the podcast that are applicable to certain conversations that salespeople have, take those clips from the podcast and as a free thing, just send it to the people you're talking to. So like, hey, I'm picturing an email going out to somebody you just talked to on the phone, right? You know, hey, so-and-so, it was really great to talk with you. You know, in our podcast, there was this clip of the thing we were just talking about on the phone. I thought it would be helpful, so here you go. Hope you have a great day. Something like that. So yeah, you can use the smaller, like kind of chunks, like I'm thinking 2 to 5 minute segments of a podcast, depending on how long your podcast is, and use that as like, all right, so here were some subtopics within that that will help people understand a certain thing, whatever it is, and it could be a great sales follow-up. It can just be more content that you have out on YouTube and whatever.
Each thing could hit different people or different ways. Like draw. So it's like multiple pieces of content from one thing
Right.
that can be used to build your audience.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, so getting new followers would be something like, break it up into like 45-second reels or TikToks or whatever. Kind of, I want to be careful because I would not recommend you getting on a social platform where your audience isn't.
Oh.
So it is not helpful to get tons of followers and all these different things if your audience is super like small, if it's super niche, if it's super specific. It doesn't matter if, like, to be honest, it really doesn't matter if, say, like, people in my family watch this video.
Right.
Because they're not my target audience.
Right.
If marketers, if communication people watch it, then great. But I need to be posting this where they're at. Almost everybody's on YouTube, so that's great. So
yeah, how do you find out where your audience is?
You just have to do research, and like as you're talking to people, like you figure that out.
Okay.
But like to build your audience, to gain followers, that kind of points you back to the main podcast, is make those shorts, make those reels. More and more YouTube has been really leaning in and building out this YouTube Shorts function. It's they are getting more, they're incentivizing it more and more. They're showing it to more and more people. It comes up in people's feeds, even if they're just browsing regular YouTube videos. But when you can get people with the shorts, and those are just the like bite-sized like things that people can grasp. I don't like the way I said that, but like if you can do that and then they keep watching your stuff, maybe they'll start watching your longer YouTube content. And because of the For You algorithms, maybe like YouTube will be pushing those things towards the people who are like, ooh, I like this. I like what they said. I like this. Like, I know that's happened to me with like Chris Doe from the future. Like I started watching some of his stuff and like, wow, this is really great. And then I started watching more of his long form content, and now I'm like listening to his podcast. And so and he's even made me a buyer because I've like bought I've actually bought 2 courses from them. And so, and I think it really all started with these shorts, like these reels that I was seeing. So it is very important to try to take it's not have a podcast for the podcast's sake, and don't just do the long form. Make sure you break it up into the smaller chunks, because I think that's really going to give you the most bang for your buck. And I think that's the beauty of like what the podcast is. It's one big thing that you can chop up into a lot of little things. You get to repurpose it in such, I think, a really cool way. And to be honest, I feel like it's it's a way that resonates a bit with me because it feels more authentic, because it's a podcast, and you like each piece of that is just a snippet of it, but then it keeps like pointing. You have to be intentional with it, like to either point people back to your website or to the larger podcast.
Sure.
But yeah, so I rambled a lot, but yeah, it's very important to make sure you use ways you can use the podcast are, having a blog on your website that features, like if you go to devisinggood.com/podcast, you'll see each episode has its own blog post. But then you take that, and I'm planning on doing this, but like as I have time, I'm going to take larger chunks, like several minute chunks of specific things that we talk about. And then some of you may have seen, but like I'm trying to make reels, the YouTube shorts
right.
to post as well,
Right.
from those specific conversations to give
Sure.
people a taste.
Yeah.
So
And this is coming to mind. This might be kind of obvious, but I almost feel like it's like so
it's
obvious
great.
you might, it could be
Yeah.
easy to miss. So it seems like there's a shift in thinking this way with content marketing. It's not just a focus on whatever it is that you offer. You're kind of having to shift your focus to be in the shoes of the person who you're serving.
It's interesting because I actually wrote down in the notes that you want to think about it a little bit more relationally. I think some of the best podcasts, this is totally my opinion, I think the best podcasts have listener or viewer interaction. So, one, you're talking about things that you think would be helpful to them, but then you also get like listener feedback. Ask, hey, if you have a question, text this number to whatever, fill out this form. So side note, if you're listening to this, there's a link in the description for you to send us your questions. But like, it's a great way to get their questions answered. So what is bugging them? What's keeping them up at night? What are the things that are just like rolling around in their heads? So, okay, you said this thing about in your podcast, because this is what happens to me all the time with the Pro Church Tools podcast. They have a number you can text in your questions or whatever. And a lot of times I'll be listening to something they say, and at the end, I make sure I like write it down when I have a thought or a question for them, because sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe they'll answer it if I listen to the whole thing. But if they don't, then I take that question that was prompted by whatever they said, and then I give them I'm giving them more fuel for their future podcast. They're getting my engagement. And I'm fully engaged with it.
They're helping you
like,
with whatever the question is.
100%. Yeah. And so it's a mutually beneficial relationship. So even though money hasn't exchanged hands, right? So I think it's super helpful to do something like that. If you are, man, I feel like there's all sorts of ways you can go on this, and maybe we should make this its own. It'd be interesting to like make a couple different episodes talking about our specific genres or of people. So thinking about like churches, nonprofits, and small businesses. What are ways you can kind of go about that? But so maybe that should be its own podcast. But I think that would actually be a good idea. We should do that.
Cool.
But yeah, I think you're right. It has to be, it's important to think of it as a kind of relationship with your audience. And to try to get feedback, to try to get engagement, not just like, subscribe, hit the bell notification, not just the honest 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever, but which those things are helpful and important. And if you're listening to this, please do all those things. But it's really like, not just can you, listener, get me visible,
right?
But what can I do to serve you? So if you have I want to serve these people, and this is a way I can connect with them, because what I have, the thing I feel like my organization does is going to serve these people, then I want to engage with them. I want to tell them things. I want to share with them specific pieces of knowledge. So Does that all make sense?
Yeah. I feel like there's so many ways you could, like, so many questions that could come up with this.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, if an organization or business is not doing this,
Yes.
and they're thinking like, okay, maybe we should do this. What are the qualities in a person who would be good? It sounds like they need to be kind of relational, not just
really
task oriented.
Like, who should be on the podcast?
Who should be in charge of the podcast? Who needs to be like thinking this way?
So yeah, that's a good question. I think it has to be somebody who is engaging with the audience on some level.
Okay.
So they have to be. So that's why I think like marketer or salesperson, or even like at my role at the church communications, like I am constantly, if I'm not talking, I can't talk with like all the different kinds of people that go to our church, but I can talk with their ministry heads who then tell me, because they're the ones who are engaging with those people. So from them, I can be like, oh, okay, I'm hearing kind of your side of the story. Like, you're having this problem. What if we did this?
Okay.
So as long as it's somebody who's really thinking about like, how can I engage and bless people? I think that would be good. But like, not everybody. So I had a call with somebody, and we were talking about content creation and different things, but like, one of the lines from that, I forget who said it, but basically it's like, you are not for everybody, but you are for somebody.
Right.
And with the way algorithms are and different things like that, like, you will find your people. Like, right now, this podcast is in super like infancy, and so we don't have a huge following yet or anything like that. This is a long-term strategy, and it will connect with somebody. And the people that you are connecting with, I think, are going to be like more long-term connections versus just short-term. And so, yeah, and I mean, shoot, to be honest, say you're going after a specific kind of person, and they really resonate with a kind of a personality type, a certain education level, certain experience level. You want to kind of make sure that person's on the podcast. Like, whoever, like, you can have like somebody who's like not in that role, and then somebody who is, but like, you want to make sure that whoever you pick for the podcast is going to be somebody who interacts well, and like, the people are going to want to listen to.
Right. With your audience.
Yeah. So just think, as you think about it, like, that's the kind of person you should have as kind of like the star of the show or whatever. Over the next few episodes, we'll probably talk about a couple different things, but one is like how to come up with topics in the flow. I've done this with a couple podcasts already, and it's really there's some things I've been learning about how to really hone that and define that. So I think that'll be good, specifically around the flow. And then like just even how to set up your podcast. So,
I mean, physically?
Yeah, like the actual, like, what websites do you use? Like, how do you submit it to Apple Podcasts and to Google and to Spotify and like all these different things? Okay. How do you set up your YouTube channel for that? And then even the gear. So like, what's kind of like the bare minimum you need to get started? And then like, there's also some specific things I'd recommend as people have the budget for it. So anyways, yeah, cool. We'll do that on some upcoming episodes. But if you are listening to this and you have any other questions, please, yes, submit it. You can either go to devisinggood.com/podcast. You can click the link in the description, or direct message if you're on social media, like whatever. Comment. If you're on YouTube, you can comment in the comments below, and hopefully we'll have something helpful to say in the next few episodes. But yeah, thanks for listening, and thank you for asking all these questions.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for watching.
Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you can get notified when new episodes come out.
And if you have any questions, you can click the link in the description to submit your questions. And if we feel like we have anything helpful to say, we'll include it in a future episode.